Welcome to another episode of Relatively Famous, the podcast where I, Chip White, interview relatives of famous people. My famous relative is Vanna White of Wheel of Fortune. She's my sister, hence relatively famous, because you're related to someone famous. Not that we're relatively famous. But today I have a great guest. His name is Ron DeFore. He is the son of Don DeFore. He was in Hazel and tons of amazing other film and television, and looking forward to chatting with Ron about his life, about his dad. But before we start that, I want to say, hey, thanks to visitmyrtlebeach.com. That's visitmyrtlebeach.com for their support of this podcast. If you're looking for a great family vacation, go to Myrtle Beach area, the Grand Strand. Check out my hometown in North Myrtle Beach. Check out the seafood all the way down to Polly's Island, Litchfield. Great restaurants, a beautiful beach, plenty of golfing, plenty of scuba diving, plenty of family activities. If you happen to be traveling with an autistic or sensory sensitive traveler, you can learn more about that on Traveling the Spectrum on Peacock. And you can also learn more about that at visitmyrtlebeach.com. And with that, I'm going to bring on our guest today, Ron DeFore.
Relatively Famous podcast with Chip White.
Ron, welcome to Relatively Famous.
Glad to be with you, Chip, and your audience.
So, Ron, I know of your dad from the TV show Hazel, and he's one of those guys you see in a million things. You go, oh, yeah, that's the guy from this, you know. He had a hell of a career, and if you would kind of I like to kind of make the connection of who my guest and who the relative is. Just kind of talk to us a little bit about your dad so that our audience, because I'm going to say, be sure to Google Don DeFore, but also tell us a little bit about, from your perspective, of who your father was.
Well, there's a lot to mention. That's why I wrote a book. But to try and put it in just a few minutes, he was in more than 35 feature films starting in the early 40s and co-starred with dozens of well-known stars like John Wayne, Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis. In fact, he was in their first picture. And Ronald Reagan he co-starred with, and many others through the 40s and the 50s. Even up to the 60s, he co-starred with Bob Hope and Lucille Ball in The Facts of Life. And in the 50s is when, obviously, television was starting to really take hold. And he played the next-door neighbor to Ozzie and Harriet in the first 5 years of that TV sitcom. And millions of Americans were getting television sets at that time. And my dad became like America's next-door neighbor because he was in virtually every episode for the first 5 years. Then there was a gap before his next series, but that gap is very important. He was very good friends with Walt Disney, and that came about because he was president of the Television Academy for 2 years. I should say, and probably one of the best. He was the very first to sell the national broadcast of the Emmy Awards show to NBC. And it was Walt and many others that called to congratulate my dad. And Walt said, Walt told him, he said, look, we tried to give away the show when I was on the board. I want to meet the guy that was able to sell it. So I want you to come out to Burbank and I'll give you a tour of the studios. My dad did. And part of the tour was seeing some heavily guarded sound stages that had a lot of the animatronics that would soon go into his Disneyland, because this was 1954 when he took the tour. Disneyland opened in 1955. Our whole family got to ride in the opening day parade in the Autopia cars of Main Street. A year later, Walt asked my dad if he wanted to own his own restaurant. And turns out my dad is very adventurous and is the only living person to ever own a restaurant inside of Disneyland. It was Don DeFore's Silver Banjo Barbecue in Frontierland. Had it for 5 years. That's why I titled the book "Growing Up in Disneyland," because it's not only a metaphor for my life growing up in a celebrity family, but literally for 5 years of my youth, we had a second home down near Disneyland. We were there almost every weekend and several weeks on end during the summer. He then, right at the close of the restaurant, got chosen to play the part of George Baxter in the TV sitcom Hazel with Shirley Booth, who had just recently won an Oscar for one of her performances. So the first couple of years, it was in the top 5 comedy shows on television, and he got very well known for being Mr. B from the Hazel series. After that, he got into a lot of different projects, co-starred in a lot of different series of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, St. Elsewhere, Love Boat, almost all the ones you can think of, Murder, She Wrote. In fact, I just got a check today. We still get residuals from SAG-AFTRA and deposited his check for the family. Anyway, so that's kind of who my dad was in a nutshell. People of my age and older will recognize him most commonly by his face, not the name. Even though he has a star on Hollywood Boulevard and was highly recognized in the 40s and 50s, we've gone way beyond that in time. And so you really have to kind of look at the face. You have to be part of the older generation to say, oh, yeah, I remember that guy.
Yeah, well, he's a very handsome man and very memorable, and he had, as you said, one amazing career. And there's so many people like that I was like, oh, what's that person's name again? I met Steven Tyler one time, and I knew exactly who he was, but I'm like, you're
right,
because you just couldn't put the name with the face. It fascinates me about the restaurant in Disneyland. Were you old enough to work there? Is that how you spent summers? Because I started my first job at a restaurant at 11 years old as a busboy.
Well, good question. I was between the ages of 7 and 12. My older brother, who was 5 years older, did work there for a whole summer. He stayed with my uncle who managed it, and there was a couple of times I got so bored that I started bussing tables. I think I did it for free, but I did not actually become an employee. But what's funny, and a lot of the people that have come to know me and my brother, because we've done a number of presentations to Disney enthusiast groups like D23, which is the big biannual ABC Disney convention in Anaheim. They don't understand one of my chapters, which is called, "Gee, do we have to go to Disneyland again?" Because these people are there all the time. They have these year-long passes. I have no desire to go there again because it just became boring. And so the 3 chapters that I do dedicate to Disneyland in there, a lot of it is stuff that we would do, mischief that we would do inside the park, because we got bored of the rides. We'd been on the rides hundreds of times. Sometimes they'd even use us kids to test some of the rides. And it's another reason why Disney legal department really wasn't happy that I published the book, because they told me, I talked to the lead lawyer. She said, look, we can't tell you can't write it, but you can understand why we don't want some of those stories out there. But anyway, it's a fun book. You don't have to have even known my dad from the comments I get on Amazon. Even younger people that are interested on, what was life like back in the 50s? What was like, for celebrities, back there? I've found that many people have enjoyed, reading it and learning about it.
Yeah. Now, what was it like being the son? And I've said it on a lot of these episodes I do. I'm just the brother, so I get, I get the fringe. I get to step in sometimes really deep, sometimes I'm on the fringe, sometimes I'm not there at all. As the child, you're immersed all the time. What was that? Was it just normal? I assume normal for you. Did you know it was different than what other people were experiencing? Did you talk to other kids at Disneyland going, oh yeah, I'm here, it's my 15th day in a row?
It's a very good question, and I deal with that in a few different sections of the book. When I was really young, my mom had a story that I got off the bus, and I figured I was probably about 6, 7, 8 years old, and I came into her and I looked. I said, "Is Dad Don DeFore?" And I remember her telling that story, and I can only assume, I don't remember, but somebody probably at school said, "Wow, your dad's Don DeFore." And I thought, well, what does that mean? I mean, right, he's my dad. And the other story that I tell is that while he was on the Ozzie and Harriet show, again, he really became America's next door neighbor. And television itself as a technology was a phenomenon. It was the first time, if you think about this, the first time characters came into your family room, joining your family. That never happened with any other art, like motion pictures in theaters, or even back when cavemen told stories, in front of the fire. You had to imagine. Radio was like that. You had to imagine the visual. Television brought these characters into your home as if they were part of your family or your neighborhood. So the fun story that I tell is that during that period when he was on the television every week on Ozzie and Harriet as a next door neighbor, we'd go shopping all the time, and us kids would love that because he was, everybody recognized him. But the most common thing is somebody would come up to him, and they didn't know the name, as you were saying earlier, but they thought that he was a neighbor, and they'd say, "Oh, hey, haven't seen you in a while. How have you been?" And my dad had such a great sense of humor. He would play right along, and he'd say, "Hey, how have you been? How are the kids? How's the wife?" And they'd start this conversation that would only last about 30 seconds because eventually the person's jaw would drop. Go, "Wait a minute, you're Don DeFore. You're an actor." And us kids would just howl. We loved that. It played it over and over again.
Oh, that's great. Now when you said you came home and you asked, is Dad Don DeFore? Was there a moment in your life where it's like, I mean, I've said it before, I used to love when at the height of Wheel, it's not so much now as it used to be, but like walking to the airport with my sister, and she's walking fast because she knows if she doesn't, she'll never get to her plane. And you're passing and you're watching the people walking towards you, and there's that, you can see their mind clicking and clicking and clicking, and about the time they hit, it clicks, but when they finally really click and turn around, she's 20 feet past them, that, oh my God, that was Vanna White. Was there times in your life where you're watching that happen with your dad, or that it kind of maybe got annoying that people were?
It never got annoying. And I used to love that. I've talked to my brothers and sisters about this before, and I out of 5 kids, I kind of became the curator. Thus, that's why I guess I'm the one that wrote the book. But I would love that. It gave me a feeling of being really special. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It wasn't like, I was better than anybody, but it was always really neat. As you're saying, you'd see somebody walking towards you, and you could see it click in their mind, and they'd look and they'd say something to the person that they were walking with, and you knew that they recognized, who my dad was. And I loved that feeling. I loved it. And I wound up missing that feeling when he passed away.
Oh, I'm sure. So you said 4 brothers and siblings? 4 brothers and sisters? 5 kids?
I've got an older brother and 3 sisters.
Okay, so there's 5 of you. Get 5. What's a household like? It was just Van and I growing up. My son's an only child. What's the household like with 5 kids. Dad's famous. He's working. Mom's doing what mom's doing. What was the relationship between the 5 kids? Like I said, you became the curator. Is there or was there moments of complete disdain for each other, or was it always, what was that 5 brothers and sisters like?
We were very fortunate. There was, there was always, some arguing or something, but there was really a lot of love. My book is not like a kiss and tell book that has, a mommy dearest type of thing. We were just very fortunate that it was almost like a Ozzie and Harriet type of family. Nothing ever was perfect, but we got along very well. Even to this day, we all get along extremely well. And to your earlier point about, did I feel like that we were in like this really special space? No, I didn't realize until I was much older and looking back and going, wow, it's unbelievable what I went through. Our family got to meet the Beatles, Beach Boys, Led Zeppelin, and we were in parades, and I just thought a lot of the time I didn't like it. We'd have all these photo shoots at the house, and I'd rather be riding my mini bike or, playing with my friends instead of dressing up for a photo shoot. I must tell you, I just thought of this, that your sister, Vanna White, is in my book. You know why? I won't tell you the whole story because it's a very funny story, but my dad would have dozens of projects going on, and one of them was developing a game show. And he had the whole board of the whole set and everything, and he was explaining it to my brother and he was talking about these gals in short skirts that would walk up the stairs, and they would be placing this here, and they're called Twinkling Inklings. And later on, I write in the book, I said, my dad may have come up with the original concept of Vanna White.
That's funny. It's amazing how many books I read, whether they're novels or biographies, that she's in. I mean, it's one of those things, no matter where I go, she's there. And it's always in a positive light. I'm not bashing it. It's, I'll go to a restaurant in the middle of the country, no one around, and I'll look up and there's an autographed picture of her on the wall. It's, wow. It's amazing. Now, you did say 2 things that kind of, first of all, I do not think of Don DeFore and Led Zeppelin in the same sentence.
Right.
And I had a mini bike, so I want to hear about your mini bike. And I had so much fun on that thing as a kid. Today, kids just, I don't know, they got their own versions, but tell me about your mini bike and tell me about Led Zeppelin.
Well, I got a mini bike when I was about 11 or 12. Let me put it in context. My dad had built a custom house in 1947 on Mandeville Canyon. When there was only a few houses around. There were houses that had horses. Our house, for a while, had a cow and chickens and stuff. It was very, very rural. You wouldn't do that now in Brentwood. But so I was maybe 11 or 12, and me and my neighbor friend, we both had mini bikes. Mine was a 2-cycle and his was a 4-cycle. So I was always a little bit faster than he was. But we would ride those up and down Mandeville Canyon. Mandeville goes up 6 miles, and then Westridge comes off the top up into the mountains, and we would ride the dirt roads. Most of the time, I don't think we even told my mom that, we'd be gone for the day. We'd just go. And I talk a lot about that in the book, about growing up in the 50s, how different it was, how much safer it was, and that's my mini bike story. Loved it.
Yeah. I that and go-karts, those are just things that you don't read about today.
Led Zeppelin, it's a real stretch to connect that to Don DeFore, because the only connection really was me. It's when after some college at the University of Oregon, I got a job at KTLA TV, one of the big local stations in LA. And one of the jobs I had was assistant on-air promotion director. So I had a big suitcase of cameras and stuff that I would use. And I heard that Led Zeppelin was going to have their first concert at the LA Forum. And at that time, KTLA was like LA's big sports station. It was owned by Gene Autry at the time. And he had a big contract with the Forum to cover all of their sports events that were there. So I knew that there was a connection between the station I was working at and the Forum. So I go up to the sports director's office, and I made up some story. I don't know, he must have seen right through it. But I said, maybe it'll make sense if I go there and take some shots when there's a concert there. Anyway, I think he saw through it. But about a week later, I come back to my office, and on my chair is an on-stage press pass to the Led Zeppelin concert in 1971. So I have some great shots. I mean, it was just me and their own photographer allowed on stage. So I was able to get literally within 6-7 feet of these guys.
Wow.
And and I play guitar. I had several bands. I played lead guitar. So just to stand on the stage and stare at thousands of fans while music is going was really a thrill.
And man, I can imagine. Okay, tell me about your bands, because I think I looked and saw a little bit about it, but I'm not 100% sure
Well,
that
we never
grasped
became
them.
famous. Actually, the band that my brother was in got some fame. In fact, they were on one of the Joey Bishop shows. They needed a band, and so they were on that. But no, I started playing guitar in junior high, and learned it very quickly. And so we had a band, junior high, high school, college, and we played for a lot of gigs, a lot of weddings, bar mitzvahs, you name it, and school dances, and enjoyed it, loved it.
Okay, so a lot of I jump around a lot because a lot of people always say, "Hey, you know what? We talked about my dad and this and that, but you never asked me about my family. Tell me about your family, kids, life. What is your family life like?"
Well, my family life has changed, quite a bit. I didn't get married until I was 32, so most of that early life was single and living in Brentwood. I had an apartment not too far from my parents' house, and but I have a chapter called My 20 Careers, because I've literally had that many kind of careers, and I love just floating around. I mean, I loved, that each career was more bizarre than the other. Well, after being in television, I was the associate director of the Steve Allen Show in my early 20s. Then I went to Paramount. I was production coordinator while we were doing Happy Days, Odd Couple, Little House on the Prairie. Then I went to Billy Jack Productions, and he was terrible to work for. He kind of blew me out. I didn't want to be in that business anymore, and I kind of hit my midlife crisis at 26.
Yeah.
And music was something I loved, and I got into working for a mobile DJing company, and this was before disco. Called Captain Disco, and it was run out of a guy's house in Malibu, and we would do private parties, and we did all sorts of things, and I always tried to do the best at whatever I did, and very quickly, especially when disco hit in, my friend that owned Captain Disco was right in the right place. We wound up supplying music and DJs to like 25 clubs in Southern California. And I wound up becoming the head DJ. So I wound up being the opening DJ at Dylan's, which was a 4-story discotheque in Westwood. And then they built even a bigger one downtown where they featured DJ flying on the ceiling. It was like a 30-foot ceiling. Well, that was me. I was the flying DJ. That would explain one of the graphics that I sent you when I'm in that spacesuit. I
Yeah,
was the
okay.
flying DJ. Well, getting to your answer. How I met my wife is that one of the contracts that came into that was a guy that took care of the entertainment for one of the cruise lines down the Caribbean, and he called in a panic and said, "Hey, my DJ just left. I got somebody like right now." And I said, "Hey, that's me. I'll go right now." So for 10 weeks, I was the DJ for Sitmar Cruises in the Caribbean. And Lori was one of the passengers. And make a long story short, she became my wife. And that's when my family started. But we waited several years. And then it was 1989. We had our first baby girl, Brittany. And then a few years later, my son, John. So I've got two kids. We at that time we were in Virginia because I missed a whole part, and there's just too much to say. It's all in the book. But I mentioned earlier that Dad co-starred with Ronald Reagan. Well, that really paid off when Ronald Reagan became president. Both my dad and I became Reagan appointees, and so I had several positions within the Reagan administration, which brought me back to where I am now in Virginia to work in the administration, and so we've been back here ever since, and doing 6 years in the federal government, and I learned enough about the ropes and everything that I started my own company with two other people in 1995, and built a very successful company that still goes today, Stratacom.
Wow, that is 20 careers. And the funny thing is, in 1979, I became a DJ at a club called Another World in Myrtle Beach. Kind of through the same thing. There was a company in New York called Juliana Sound Services, and they provided DJs and music, and they'd come in and build your booth and stuff. And they hired, I was temping with the DJ who was there, but they ended up hiring me to be a DJ there, and I ended up DJing in outside of Philadelphia in Valley Forge for them, and went back to the beach and DJed in country clubs and like 5 other. I loved DJing. It was a performance for me.
Yeah, it was, and you got to experience much of what I experienced as well. I loved it. It was fun.
Yeah, those times, the and I hate to sound like the old man, get off my lawn, kids, but man, the nightclub scene back then was special. You dressed up, you went out to dance and to meet people, and it wasn't about going to getting loaded. It was like dance. I mean, I would dance from the minute at 8 p.m. when we started in the DJ booth. I would dance till 1:30 when we closed. I'd go to the next club that was open and as a patron and dance until 2 or 3 or 4, and then go to the next one till 6, and that was kind of every day. It's not like that today, or maybe it is. I'm just too old to go. So, Don, we are getting close to out of time. I'm going to ask you a question that I ask everyone, or not everyone, but a lot of people. What did your childhood smell like?
What did it smell like? that's an interesting question. It was sweet. It was probably a lot of different flavors of sweet. Very rarely do I remember any bad smells. It was pretty nice.
Okay. What's the one question that I didn't ask you that you wish I'd have asked, or the one thing we didn't talk about that you really wanted to get out today and we kind of get skirting it around?
Oh, that's tough. Well, I'll mention one that I can think of, and that is I had mentioned that I got to meet the Beatles. It's one thing to meet Led Zeppelin or the Beach Boys. In fact, I was Mike Love's PR guy for a day at the Live Aid concert. But the Beatles was during the time when I was working on the cruise ship. I had actually, no, I'm sorry. That's another story. This would have been 1963 or 4. Anyway, right when the Beatles were coming on the scene. And we're having dinner with my family, and my mom says, "Hey, Dad, Don, why don't you tell the kids what you got in the mail today?" My dad says, "Well, yeah, I'm not sure what it is. It's a fundraiser, and it's called Meet the Beatles. Do kids know what Beatles are?" And of course, we went, "What do you mean, Meet the Beatles?" They say, "Well, this is for an exclusive garden party to meet the Beatles." He says, "It's pretty expensive. They want, a donation of $25 a person." I said, "Dad, we're going." And it turns out that one of my dad's former PR agents was one of the guys coordinating this with the president of Capitol Records. And it was right when the Beatles were doing their first U.S. tour. They wanted to do a fundraiser, and it was Meet the Beatles in the backyard of the Capitol Records president, his wife, his mother-in-law's house in Brentwood. And it was a garden party, and it was, maybe 100 families were invited. No press was allowed in there. And we go in, and Beatles come in. Now, all along San Vicente Boulevard, I've got a film of the thousands of young kids that were along San Vicente Boulevard, screaming and yelling as the Beatles limousine came up. And they came in, and they set them on 4 stools, and every family got to come by and shake their hand. I've got black and white photos of me shaking hands with Paul, and again, it was one of those things, as I said earlier, that I didn't really realize until years later, and looking back at that and going, my God, so few people can say that they went through an experience like that.
Yeah, that's something that personal is up close and personal. And to think $25, you would pay $50,000 for that now.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, Ron, it's been a pleasure, and I really have enjoyed it. I know there's a ton more. Who knows? Maybe we'll do a part 2 in the future. And the book is Growing Up in Disneyland, and the link will be down in the show notes. And dude, I've enjoyed talking to you. Actually, I didn't know a lot, people are probably sick of me saying I don't do a lot of research. I like to have a conversation, and it's been fun. I really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Chip.
Thanks, Ron. Okay. DeFore and Beatles and Led Zeppelin were not what I was thinking we're going to talk about, but that was awesome. I want to thank Ron for being on the show. I want to thank you, the viewer, the listener, for humbly taking your time to watch or listen. We hope that you will like, share, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your enemies. If you don't like it, tell your enemies about it. But I'm so thankful that you spend time with us. I want to thank our Nelco Media, our producers. I want to thank Nelco Comics for the amazing comic book location here in San Antonio. If you're looking for a comic book or online, Nelco Comics. I want to thank our underwriters. That's visitmyrtlebeach.com, visitmyrtlebeach.com, where you can have an amazing East Coast family vacation, or just get away if you want to go with the guys and play some golf, or the ladies and sip some wine by the beach. It's a great place to go, and you can learn more about it at visitmyrtlebeach.com. And if you happen to be related to someone famous or know someone related to someone famous, you can reach out to me at podcastrelativelyfamous@gmail.com. Podcastrelativelyfamous@gmail.com. Once again, thanks for spending your time with us.
You've been listening to Relatively Famous with Chip White. Please like and subscribe to Relatively Famous with Chip White.